The Panthers were slow coming out of the gate in Ottawa's season opener. They attempt a comeback, come out on the losing end, and in the process, they lose Aleksander Barkov. We're going to discuss that and more on today's Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, October 11th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at Monoman12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bets and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. You can do that all by visiting FanDuel.com. So, in Game 2 of the season for the Florida Panthers, hitting the road immediately after raising a Stanley Cup championship banner, the Panthers were already coming into this game with Adam Boqvist after him stepping on the ice with a bubble, but Nate Schmidt making his season debut for the Florida Panthers, but for the Cats this time around, slow coming out of the gate, odd man rushes galore for the Ottawa Senators that resulted in a multi-goal lead for them. And the Panthers attempted a comeback in the middle of the second period, tilted the ice in the final 40, but came up short as the Ottawa Senators and win by a final score of 3-1. And today, joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, it is Nich Fairbanks for another edition of Fairbanks Friday, a post-game edition of the show. And Nick, coming into this, even with the last 2 minutes for the Panthers, I was fairly encouraged by the final 40 for them, where obviously when you win a Stanley Cup, you look at these regular season games and you look more about habits of how the Panthers are creating and how dominant the Panthers were in the final 40. But you can't help with this black cloud going or hovering over this team right now with what happened at the end with Barkov breaking his stick, trying to stop a breakaway from Tim Stutzle, and then crashing into the boards feet first and slow to get up towards the end. We'll provide a little bit of an update at the very end of the show. But Nick, welcome back, but not under the best of circumstances. Already in Game 2 of the season.
Definitely not. And the big thing we gotta really, wonder about now is if it's gonna be a long-term issue or if this is gonna be a week-to-week issue, and who's gonna step up if that's the case. But as you said, we should be encouraged by the final 40. It seems like the team threw the kitchen sink over at Allmark, but to be honest, he didn't have to do a lot tonight. It was the team in front of him that was blocking shots. I think on the broadcast they said they blocked like 28 to 30 shots off their chins, off their sticks. So they were doing very good things as far as getting into lanes and not allowing the Panthers to really get a lot of chances. They put on, I think, 80 shots during the game, or they had 80 shot attempts, and only 30 got through. So, hats off to the Senators. They came out really hot, and, if it wasn't for a really good screen and a really well-placed shot, we might be talking differently about this game.
Yeah, possibly for them. And 83 total shots according to Natural Stat Trick, and then 66 for the Panthers at 5-on-5. 66-40 was the Corsi 4 in this contest for them. And even having one more shot attempt than the Ottawa Senators in the first period, only 4 of them got on net with 5, and then odd man rushes for the Senators 5-0 in the first period. Panthers missing the net, overthinking, and I mean, credit to Ottawa there. And even if they weren't blocking shots, they were closing in and making the Panthers think very quickly, which had them missing the net for them in this one. And then going from 17-5, but also for the Panthers, I mean, a little bit of encouraging sign with this one is The third line for the Panthers, Mackie Samoskevich, Eetu Luostarinen, and Anton Lundell. There was times where the Panthers towards the final 40 were just pinning them deep, getting their 5-man changes like very smoothly in them, and also a line change with putting Evan Rodriguez back on that top line with Aleksander Barkov, and then shifting for Hagen. That very first shift that the Panthers had with those changes, they score with thanks to Gustav Forsling. And Gustav Forsling, man, what a first 2 games he's already having. I know plus minus isn't the be all end all, but he after that goal he was +4 on the season already for him, and just what the Panthers were able to do, and just taking their north and south game, protecting the neutral zone, anticipating, winning their board battles towards the end. But like you said, it really came down to just protecting Linus Hallmark, the block shots, the lack of second chance opportunities for them. But man, that third line is really, I'm fairly pleased, I must say.
Yeah, and to get to Gustav Forsling real quick, I haven't decided if I want to call him Mr. Plus Minus or just Mr. Plus. If he's going to continue the way that he's going right now. And you know what? If he's going to keep doing that, then he's going to be a household name, and his jersey is going to go up in the rafters, as a Florida Panther. But the third line definitely was probably the best line tonight outside of, I would probably say, the Bennett line. Bennett has just been a menace, and I think we know why he's being extra right now, and good for him. But the third line really, I think, as the game wore on, got better and better. I was not overly happy with Samoskevich early in the game. I felt like he was losing a lot of battles, wasn't really getting to the puck. But again, as the game wore on, he was starting to win battles. He was where he needed to be, and he almost tied the game up on that wraparound. So, it was just a few inches away, and that line could have turned this game around, and we could be talking again differently about this game. So again, the positives, from that first period, I think we can look into going into the next game or two, and if they continue to do what they did, they should be successful.
Yeah, and I think of with not only the Mackey on that wraparound attempt for them, and I just think about that line of what they were doing in their fair share of battles, and even with how confident Eetu Luostarinen was in that play of pinning the Sens into the board, and then being strong enough to keep them there, and for Mackie Samoskevich to get to the puck to skate around as well. So that's also the great thing about the puck support that was there for the Panthers on the night for them, and also for the fourth line. It was in the beginning of the game where the fourth line was really starting to set a little bit of the tone while everyone else was a little bit slower. So it was really from the fourth starting going back up, and then when the line changes happened, that's when we really saw them being so much stronger on the puck. I mean, the fourth line, they were over 60 Corsi 4 percentage. The Verhaeghe line, my goodness, Nick, their Corsi 4 was over 80%. 6-3 in shots for in favor of them as well. Hey, I don't know if it's a keep them after this game for Paul Maurice, but we've seen how much flip-flopping he's done of these lines so many times throughout the last few years. And I mean, there's more than a 10-game sample size of each of these lines, switching them back and forth between that. And we've seen it all throughout the postseason. So it's just going back to what has been familiar with those two wingers, and switching them up throughout the game. So that's another thing on what is and the timing of it after TV timeout. Too, in between, I believe it was the after 6 TV timeout. That's when the Panthers really started pushing, and then the penalty kill right before they scored. Anton Lundell was the strongest on the puck in their own end, and it's like there wasn't even a penalty kill at all with how strong the Panthers were at 5-on-5 after. So really, I know we're about to get to 3 duds, and I know they didn't win, but if there was one really standout on all ends of the ice, Anton Lundell is for sure one.
I will wave my little flag there. Lundell's my boy. He's really starting to really come into his own now. Offensively, I think he's going to start getting it going. I know he hasn't scored yet, but if that line keeps humming the way it started, doing it in the second and third period, everything's going to be fine. And who knows with this injury and everything, where Lundell's going to play next, if they're going to move him to the second line with Tkachuk, which they've had some good chemistry before, or if they're going to try and push him to the first line and try to play with Rhino and perhaps either Rodriguez or Verhaeghe. So big shoes to fill, obviously, but you like to see the steps that he's taken already, and maybe he can take a few more.
Yeah, and for the Panthers, big part of tilting the ice, 17 shots in that first period, and then to 5 in the second, and really brought it in their direction, and really showed signs of more of the Florida Panthers identity in this one. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we are going to give our 3 duds of the game, and we are going to discuss more about when we thought this game was lost. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. And if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 300 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to an Indeed recent survey. Leveraging over 100 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. And listeners to this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And I'd like to thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Friday edition of the show, where the Florida Panthers lose by a final score of 3-1 against the Ottawa Senators in a tightly contested game in the final 40 before the Ottawa Senators eventually scored on the empty net. And once again, the Panthers lose Aleksander Barkov in the process in this one. But Nick, 2 games, 3 special teams goals against. The Florida Panthers are 0 for 8 on the power play. Balinska's going up on that top unit. Nate Schmidt being part of the lineup now, with Adam Boquist being down. Thankfully, he's okay and possibly able to play on Saturday. The power play still very perimeter based. The opposition, especially for Ottawa in this one, was very comfortable with spreading more of their box outside and then closing in when to take away the bumper position for them. So still a little bit of a work in progress, which is something that we knew was going to be a thing throughout this season, as they figure out who's going to be that mainstay. So one thing I wanted to point out on the power play. Anything that you want to say about it to this point?
When has Florida ever come out hot on the power play? I mean, every year there's been changes, and it seems like it always takes a while for them to get going. Now their penalty kill, come on, boys. This has got to be a little bit better. So I understand there's new personnel there, but I feel like with the people or the guys that they brought in and everything, that this should be, a top unit again. But, as you said, the power play needs to get it together. One thing I have noticed is that they're trying to stay up top more. They're not trying to get it down low anymore. And maybe it is because they understand that the other teams understand that the bumper play is going to be there. But you know what? You still have the other player across the ice that can tap the puck in, and that's Verhaeghe. All he has to do is streak down, and you make the pass go to him. I know it's easier said than done, but they did it in the playoffs. I mean, that's, what Barkov sent it to Verhaeghe against Tampa. But my big thing is that where's Matthew Tkachuk right now? I understand that, the first game of the season, he was target number 1, or actually enemy number 2 outside of Sam Bennett. This game, I don't know. I really couldn't say. I mean, he was winning some puck battles, but other than that, I really couldn't tell you one play that he made that really kind of made him stand out. So
Yeah.
if you're talking about duds right now, I would have to put Matthew Tkachuk on there.
And that'll be a good time to talk about our duds for this game. I have Nico Mikkola in this one. uh, Dmitry Kulikov on that turnover that caused the 2-on-1 that eventually Shane Pinto scored. And Nate Schmidt, I wasn't really overwhelmed by his play on the night, as I saw multiple times of when the Senators were trying to dump it in, got a little bit behind, especially on them, and and a little bit hesitant on getting it out in their own end, which is really what had Ottawa really pressuring Sergei Bobrovsky, and it's really the second chance opportunities for them. So I'm going to go with 3 defensemen on the night for the Panthers here. I know you already named Matthew Tkachuk as one of your duds, but who are your other 2?
I think in the winning moments of the game or when the Panthers had the most pressure, the one defenseman that stood out to me in a bad way, even though he was doing very well and keeping the puck in, was Dmitry Kulikov. Dude, I know you've been in the league for about 14, 15 years now. Please hit the net or put it on goal. I I can't tell you how many times he's shot and it's gone wide or way nowhere close to the net. And if you were to just get it on goal, Florida has a chance to actually get a rebound, put it in, or get a deflection. But maybe that's all he's shooting for is like a wide deflection. But again, you can't. The best pass is a rebound, and I'll just leave it at that. Dennis Pavin's famous line there. So, and then my third dud. Whew, this one might hurt some people. Mister, I just signed my contract, Carter Verhaeghe. Um, Dude, I need to start putting the puck in the net. You had some chances in the first game. You had a breakaway. You had a lot of chances tonight. It seems like you're about to get there, but I think when the Panthers needed a goal, you were the guy that I think we were going to depend on to get us tied up, and it's not happening right now. So I'll go with Kachuk, Kulikov, and Verhaeghe.
Yeah. So that definitely very fresh off that deal of but hey, thankfully he has 82 games in a year, and multiply that by 8 more, so it's everyone's gonna get a dud once in a while on this show when it comes to the Panthers losing a game. So
Watch, he scores a hat trick next game. Watch.
Hey, that'll be awesome, and he'll definitely be our stars, one of our stars for sure. Moment where we thought the game was lost. The moment where I thought was when Ekblad took that penalty, and which you can't review it, but Timmy Stutzle was offside on that, and just a horrible situation for the Panthers there, as they were really truly pressuring the Ottawa Senators. Also, weird sequence of events for Nico Mikkola in both of his penalties, where Bob makes a stop. The referee blows the whistle as the Panthers retrieve the puck. And then in that very next D-zone draw, Mikkola high sticks goes to the box for a high stick. And then the other one on the interference, that one I was not okay with. The puck was pretty well
right
away.
There.
It was right there. I would not have called that a penalty. But I thought that the Panthers were really going to pull a comeback Cats. So when Ekblad took that penalty, that's when I said the game was lost.
So I will say when the Lundell line hemmed the Senators in their zone for a good minute 50, I'll say. And then Florida was able to get a full line change with Verhaeghe, I think Kachuk, and Bennett, and they didn't score. Right there, it's just like you guys just threw everything you had at them, and nothing could go in. So I think with that amount of pressure, it just fizzled out after that. I mean, the boys still tried, but I think with that amount of sustained pressure, you have to score in that situation.
When it's your best shift of the night and throwing the kitchen sink and trying to get something and you don't end up, can be definitely emotionally draining for a team as they're trying to attempt a comeback for them. So definitely a good a good thing for you to point out of that moment that truly affected the game. For you guys listening, and if you guys are on the YouTube channel, comment on your 3 duds and along with when you thought the game was lost for yourselves on the YouTube channel, and we definitely read the comments for sure. But we are going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to provide an update on Aleksander Barkov. And Panthers, they have some early adversity, but let's talk more about that adversity that is coming their way. More, and we'll discuss that more next here on Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And hey, NFL fans, you can start with the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can start with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Once again, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you could do that all at FanDuel.com. And I'd like to thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show, where the Florida Panthers lose to the Ottawa Senators by a final score of 3-1 from the Canadian Tire Center, as the Panthers go to 1-1 on the year and 3 games remaining on the road trip, as we are through 2 games of the season. They lose Aleksander Barkov in the process of this one. And now there's early adversity for the Panthers here. And this could possibly be a good thing for them as a collective. But like we talk about depth of this roster, guys being so bought in when it comes to training camp, but Aleksander Barkov is just not one of those players that you could just flat out replace. Best defensive player in the NHL. The obvious move is to move Lundell up a spot. We've seen this all throughout his young career of him being one of the first guys to move up. So that is going to have a little bit of a trickle down effect, Nick. And we were just praising that third line with Lundell and Mackey and Etu. And that's gonna be a little tough for a youngster like Mackey, who might have to work with a new center in Jesper Boquist if this injury for Barkov is long term, which Paul Maurice said that he will be checked today and tomorrow. So I am not going to expect Barkov to suit up on Saturday when the Florida Panthers take on the Buffalo Sabres. So what are you thinking of all this early adversity for the Panthers?
Different type of adversity. Last year, they came into the season well knowing that top 2 of their top 4 defensemen were going to be out until November, December, maybe even January, and they held it together and they played really well. Now you have their best player, captain, and again, as I said earlier in the show, big shoes to fill. Somebody's got to step up. And I already named the player that needs to step up, and it's Matthew Tkachuk. He needs, again, to pick this team up and put them on his shoulders and will them now to a few wins. Buffalo's Buffalo. I'm sorry if there's any Sabre fans here, but until you guys prove who you guys are, I'm not really worried about them. It's the Boston game that I'm really starting to kind of wonder, like, hey, we kind of had their way with them on opening night. What's going to happen now when we don't have Barkov to kind of level that field? So, last time in the Stanley Cup, we thought he was going to be out with a concussion. And he came back next game, and it's just like he rose from the dead, and Draisaitl was like, what? So I think I want to be hopeful, and I'm going to be positive. I don't think this is going to be long-term, in my opinion. I think it's going to be short-term, maybe week to week.
Yeah, and going back to the Stanley Cup final, and that was probably a situation where if it was a regular season game, he's out and not playing. So obviously we are thinking the long term here for the captain and the team for the Panthers, and just knowing that it's a journey throughout all of this, and just knowing that, hey, this isn't something new that we've seen out of Aleksander Barkov, and time missed, that it's about just the right time when it comes to just health, for when it comes to a pursuit of a championship. So we've seen it all throughout that, and when it came to them ultimately getting the prize that they've been wanting so much in throughout their careers. And the thing is, for Florida, is the good news is that they've been dominant against Buffalo. The Buffalo Sabres haven't won a game. They've dropped 2 in the Global Series against the Devils, and they lost against the Kings tonight, which Anze Kopitar got a hat trick for LA.
Mm-hmm.
But the bad news is they're going to get a desperate team who is trying so hard to get out of the basement. There's a new quote unquote coach in town in Lindy Ruff there. The offense for Buffalo has taken a step back. They've transitioned more to a defensively structured team. You get Bowen Byram part of the mix. It's Stanley Cup champion. Ryan McLeod is now centering one of the lines there. So there's a little bit more of a roster balance there. So that is a new kind of beast that the Panthers are facing in this really early season matchup, in this on the road too, regardless of whether it's a hostile environment or not. Obviously, a lot of people in Buffalo aren't showing up due to the state of the team, which I don't subscribe to the whole, you have to show up regardless of winning or losing. They're tired, they're jaded. But for Buffalo and the play on the ice for that, they are that is a desperate franchise, a desperate front office, desperate ownership group just to make something happen. And when you have the Stanley Cup champions coming to town, I'm going to pull up a quote that Paul Maurice even said this morning about style of play. And I have it written down. Okay, here's the quote. People come wired to play against us because we have been the most consistent of playing that style, close quote. And it comes to just the rough stuff and the hard forecheck and just beating up on people. So they're going to be continuing getting other people's best out of this. And even for a team that hasn't won a game yet in Buffalo, I'm prepared. I'm prepared for anything.
So with Maurice saying what he did, the most consistent in the style that they play, they're going to have to dig deeper, and they're going to have to hit harder. They're going to have to wear that D down, kind of like what he said in the playoffs last year. And that's how they're going to have to win. They're going to have to play hard hitting hockey. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if it's not a high scoring game. It's going to be, it's not going to probably be the most fundamental of games, but it's going to be whoever can take advantage of their chances.
Yeah. And here's the thing with Lundell going up to, possibly, we don't know what the lineup is going to be just yet, possibly going up to that top line with already Erod being up there and Sam Reinhart, is the fact that Lundell and Reinhart have history going back to 2 years ago. After a certain part of last season, after Erod's had his 4-point games, there's a part where he was shifted down. So there has been time together. Now what you have to navigate is the Jesper Boquist's of the world coming in. The Panthers, as of right now, have 21 skaters in the lineup for them. So you're gonna have to see what you got in guys coming in, because Noshek isn't part of the mix just yet for the Panthers, as he hasn't skated yet. So that we're gonna maybe have to see what happens for a possible call up too, because you have to have that one game before you use your emergency call up. So if Barkov's not on LTIR, there is that possibility that they could be a player short going into Saturday. Hold on, I'm gonna check Puckpedia one more time. Yeah, right now they have they have 12 active forwards, and Barkov just went down.
So
possibly a skater short Saturday if it's not LTIR.
So who's going to be the 12th forward? Who's going to be the Prius? Who's going to be the who's going to show up and want to play forward and D? I don't know who's going to step up that way. Maybe they just play short.
Yeah, no. I'm assuming that they're gonna put in a little bit of a mix of someone going to the somewhat of a Nate Schmidt, Adam Boquist. So if assuming that Boquist is healthy enough to play, that's the other wild card.
I think he's going to play.
So he was on the ice this morning, so I think that he is going to play. So but what if they also use the paper transaction for Spencer Knight? Because if they happen to do that and having that insurance there to bring that extra player, you could still have a natural forward there, but then you'll have to go through the process of waivers again if you were to just call Chris Drieger back up for one game to not even play. So the gymnastics here with less than $500K in salary cap space at this moment, these next 24 hours, 48, is going to be something to navigate.
Let's see what kind of magic Bill Zito can work. He's done it before. He can do it again, but at the same time, you got to think of what's going to be best for the roster going forward. Maybe, again, you call somebody up, or maybe you go down a game without a player, and then you use that emergency call-up. But not only does Barkov's injury hurt the first line, it has the ripple effects of the rest of the team and how that's going to affect the salary cap, as you said, who might be called up and who's going to fill those other roles and everything. So Barkov, please just be out one game. That's all we're asking. Please.
That's what we hope, but hey, that we will definitely try to put 2 and 2 together based on roster moves in the next day. And although we won't have a show prior to the Buffalo game, and the next one will be when we come back from that weekend, we will update you guys on the socials and even on our YouTube page via community posts to tell you guys what the status of Aleksander Barkov is and what the call-ups could possibly look like, or if a defenseman actually plays forward in the next one. So we will see. And it's just the waiting game at this point in time for all of us here who follow this team. But Nick, I want to thank you once again for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Unfortunately, a 3-1 loss for the Florida Panthers, but still an opportunity to still finish the road trip strong with 3 more games, and we will see what happens from here. So thank you for joining me, and let everybody know where they can follow you online.
Thanks for having me on. Everybody, let's get going the rest of the season. Not all is dark right now. Barkov will be back. I'm saying. You guys can find me on X or Twitter at Prudentious0. So Armando, can't wait to be back next week.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, and see you next week.
Thank you. See you.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Nich Fairbanks, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.